Imagine waking up only when your body is ready. No alarms, no tight schedules, no obligations. You stretch, look around, and ask yourself, what do I want to do today? For 99% of human history, roughly 300,000 years, this wasn't a fantasy. It was daily reality. And back then, the answer to that question looked nothing like the life you live now. We spend roughly 90,000 hours of our lives working, about a third of our waking existence. But for most of human history, jobs simply didn't exist. No bosses, no wages, no career ladders. So what did we actually do all day? Here is what we know for sure. In 1963, archaeologist Richard Lee ran a study that reshaped our view of prehistoric life. He tracked the daily routines of Botswana's Dobeju Hausi, pronounced Kun-san people, one of the last remaining groups living like our pre-agricultural ancestors. He found adults worked just 2.5 days, about 17 hours a week, gathering food. The rest of their time was entirely theirs. And this pattern is universal. Anthropologists saw the exact same thing with the Hansa in Tanzania, the Ahir in Paraguay, and the Martu in Australia. Different places, different environments, same outcome. 15 to 20 hours a week spent on survival. That is roughly half of what most of us work today. Now you might wonder, how do we know ancient humans lived like this? The answer is hidden in their bones. Comparing ancient skeletons to early farmers reveals a clear contrast. Farmers were shorter and their bones showed signs of malnutrition, their teeth were damaged by grain-heavy diets, their spines had arthritis from repetitive labor, and overall, they died younger. Ancient skeletons, however, were taller, stronger, with healthier teeth and fewer joint issues. They clearly did less repetitive labor. But the most revealing evidence is something that shouldn't exist if life was just a struggle to survive: art. In 1994, explorers found Chauvet Cave in southern France. Inside were 30,000-year-old paintings of horses, lions, and rhinos. These weren't crude drawings. They used perspective, shading, and motion. This was complex art that required skill, planning, and above all, time. Someone spent days deep in a cave by firelight, painting animals not to survive, but for beauty, meaning, or simply as an expression. In South Africa's Blombos Cave, researchers even found 100,000-year-old shell beads, tiny seashells carefully drilled to be worn as jewelry. The closest coast was 20 kilometers away. Someone walked 40 kilometers round trip just for shells, then spent hours drilling them with stone tools just to look good. Also, in 2008, researchers in Germany found a 40,000-year-old flute carved from vulture bone. It had 5 carefully spaced finger holes. The maker understood music and pitch, spending hours crafting it solely for song, not hunting or defense. And this isn't an exception. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, 100,000-year-old sites are filled with decorative items, elaborate tools, and objects requiring hours of work with no practical survival benefit. This is how they spent their free time, creating, decorating, and expressing themselves. Let's walk through a typical day. You wake at dawn. Yesterday's fire is still smoldering as someone adds wood. For breakfast, you eat leftover fish, meat, or gathered nuts and berries. Breakfast is social, a time to chat and make loose plans naturally. Mid-morning, some might head out to hunt or gather, but you don't go every day. If a recent hunt was successful and food is stored, you might just stay in camp. You might spend the morning crafting, sharpening a spear, weaving a basket, or softening an animal hide. This isn't modern work. There are no clocks or supervisors. You do it because competence earns respect. And creating things is simply part of being human. When we did hunt, it wasn't a frantic Hollywood chase. Humans are persistence hunters. We jog after prey for hours until they overheat. Unlike most animals, we sweat to regulate our temperature while running. A hunt might take 3 to 6 hours round trip. The animal is butchered and eaten. By early afternoon, the work is done. What follows is hard for modern minds to grasp. Nothing and everything. People simply rest, sit in the shade, and talk. They play with kids, nap, and groom each other, picking through hair to build bonds. They carve designs into bone or stone and craft jewelry from shells, beads, or animal teeth. Anthropologist James Sussman found that Gen Z adults spent about 6 hours daily in social time. Not working, not sleeping, just being together, talking, laughing, and joking. In a world without money, police, or contracts, survival relied entirely on relationships. If people didn't like you, they wouldn't share food when you were hungry. So you invested serious time in those bonds, not for productivity, but simply to stay human. At sunset, a shift occurred. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Weisner analyzed hundreds of hours of Zhuan Xi recordings. She found that daytime talk was strictly practical, tracking animals, harvesting plants, or complaining about unfair sharing. But around the night fire, 81% of talk shifted to storytelling, tales of legendary ancestors, jokes, and distant adventures. Polly Weisner argued this setting birthed human culture. It allowed them to ponder gods, spirits, the past, and the future ideas that only flourish when you are full and safe. Medieval records and 1990 studies confirm that before artificial light, humans slept in 2 blocks, a first sleep of about 4 hours, then 1 to 2 hours of wakefulness in complete darkness. This was followed by a second 4-hour sleep. So a typical day was 4 to 6 hours finding food or crafting tools, 6 hours socializing, storytelling, grooming, and playing, 8 hours of split sleep, and the rest resting, sitting, watching clouds, or doing nothing. Simply existing, without needing to justify it through productivity. Then, about 10,000 years ago, a shift occurred. In the Fertile Crescent, humans turned to agriculture, planting seeds and domesticating animals, but farming was a trap. Farming feeds more people, which requires more food, which demands more farming. But within generations, population surged, making a return to hunting and gathering impossible because there were now too many mouths to feed. Once trapped, humans faced endless labor, plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, storing, and defending crops from animals and raiders. Skeletal records are clear. Early farmers worked harder, ate worse, and died younger than hunter-gatherers. Yet populations grew, creating specialists like toolmakers, potters, and inventors, followed by soldiers, priests, and administrators. Eventually, this spurred jobs and employment. The idea of trading your time to someone else for resources. By the era of cities, our original lifestyle was gone, replaced by schedules, obligations, and working most of your waking hours. Today, you spend 90,000 hours working, far more than your ancestors ever did. We sleep in 1 block and call waking up at 2 a.m. insomnia. They slept in 2 phases, using those middle hours for reflection. Today, we chase illusions of greatness, achievements, wealth, and success defined by society. But our ancestors woke up already free, already enough, and at peace, with nothing to prove. They didn't need to become successful. They lived the very life you spend your entire existence trying to retire into. You make art only when you find time after work. They created because they had time, and that's simply what humans do. We aren't a different species, but we live so differently from 99% of human history. We traded autonomy for food security, leisure for population growth, and time for productivity. Most of us don't even realize what we lost, simply because we never knew it existed.